Alrighty. Well, welcome everybody. On behalf of the ACP Florida chapter, it's a real pleasure to have you all join us for this, our last session of the Fellowship Application webinar series. Throughout this week, we have highlighted some of the most competitive fellowships out there, including cardiology, critical care, hematology oncology, and now it's the turn for gastroenterology. Tonight, I'm honored to present our three phenomenal speakers. We have Dr. Mariam Naveed, Program Director of the GI Fellowship Program at AdventHealth Orlando. We have Ernesto Robalino. He's a PGY6 and Chief Fellow at the AdventHealth Orlando GI Fellowship Program, as well as a Fellow in the Masters of Education for the Health Professions at Johns Hopkins and Co-Director of the Health System Science, the Distinction Track at Johns Hopkins. And I have our lovely Dr. Arooj Mian. She's a PGY4 at Tower Health GI Fellowship Program in Pennsylvania. So welcome you all. Thank you so much for joining us. For all of our attendees, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll try to answer them as we go along, or you may also leave them there and we'll try to go, and we'll answer those in a Q&A session at the very end of the session. This webinar will be recorded and will be posted later on in the Instagram account of our Florida chapter. So why don't we start, righty? So welcome, all of you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm excited to chat about GI, which I think at least myself, Ernesto, Arooj, and I'm sure the others love, and happy to answer any questions. So thank you for having me.
Thank you as well for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. We'll try to help as much as possible, although I didn't get that lovely as well as Arooj got, but thank you.
Okay, Ernesto. You're still in our hearts, but I'm biased so far. So in any case, guys, for all of our attendees, before we start, we wanted to get a little bit of an idea of what our audience looks like. So if you don't mind, please stating in the chat if you are a PGY1, a PGY2, PGY3, if you are maybe a medical student or residency applicant, if any of you can please state that in the chat. Alrighty, so we have some PGY2s, PGY1s, PGY3s. Righty, thank you. So we have a little bit of everything. So we have some PGY1s, some PGY2s, some PGY3s. So definitely see some of you may have already applied to GI and are in the middle of the season. Some of you then are thinking about GI. So this is good. We wanted to have an idea so then we can tailor the webinar to what may be more beneficial for the audience. Now, I will start with a very general question, but as well, I want to get your personal insights on this. So what inspired you to pursue a career in gastroenterology? So what ignited that spark, that passion that said, I wanna do GI as a fellowship?
I'm gonna let Arooj and Ernesto answer first, and then I will answer.
I can go first. Hi everyone, I'm Arooj. I'm a first-year fellow here at Reading Hospital in Tower Health. So it's a heavy question because I don't think there's one particular thing that I was like, this is it. This is why I love GI. I think I always had an interest for GI in medical school and early part of residency. And it wasn't towards the end of intern year where I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do a field that was also had a lot of procedures in it because I do like hands-on work. And I think it was when I rotated in my GI rotation that I actually was like, this is it. This is what I really want to do. And that was because I got to see the scoping side of things, and I loved the procedures. I loved how, there were so many things you could do in procedures, endoscopy, there's, dilation, there's, just APCs, there's so much you can do. And same thing with colonoscopies. And then I feel like it's like a perfect balance between the procedures and the medicine side of things. There's a lot of critical thinking involved, and it's a very exciting field at this time because we're having like very big advancements in fields like IBD and, you know, so many recent advancement in years in the treatment. So I think it was a mix of both, the fact that there's a lot of innovation coming up, as well as I would get to do procedures and practice the medicine side of things and have, you know, the best of both worlds in one field.
So it's my turn. Hello, everyone. Since Arooj mentioned that after rotating in GI with me, she decided to go to GI. Well, the reason why I chose GI, I think I initially wanted to do rheumatology. I love the autoimmune processes. I love the challenging diagnosis. But after rotating through rheumatology, I do not enjoy 100% of the outpatient life, I will say. So that's how I got interested on to gastroenterology, where it has an overlap with autoimmune diseases. IBD is a lot of a challenging diagnosis, challenging management, multidisciplinary approach. And after I got into my GI rotations, I kind of built into that, and then fell into motility and neurogastroenterology, which is even more unanswered questions that out there. So it's even more challenging than in general GI. So that's I think that fact of being challenged by diagnosis, but also being able to provide multidisciplinary holistic care of the patients that have been so many years undiagnosed and treated, and be an advocate for them. That's something that motivates me every day.
Okay. All right, then I guess it's my turn. So for me, of course, I echo what Ernesto and Arooj said, and I'm gonna even simplify it further. When I was rotating through, of course, the procedural aspects, the inpatient, the outpatient, the variety really spoke to me. But I really, really liked the people at my program. And so I think that even that really influenced my decision. I really felt like our personality really sort of worked well together. I loved their crass sense of humor. Everyone knows you have to have a certain sense of humor to go into GI. And I felt like I'd found my people. The poop jokes, the swearing in the endoscopy unit. Don't quote me on Twitter saying this, but there was a personality associated with GI. And yes, all those other things that Ernesto and Arooj mentioned, of course, they were a huge factor. I hated reading EKGs. Oh my God, nothing causes tachycardia than somebody handing me an EKG, and I was like, get it away, I don't want it. So yes, there is that aspect, and then there was the people. And so I think that, and I'm sure many of you will kind of say that, and if you don't have GI at your institution, you've been to conferences, etc., there's a personality that goes with every field. And this personality, these were my people. I just felt like I belonged, and that was a huge factor. And I think that is something that when you guys are interviewing and when you're kind of exploring where you're going to end up, I mean, it's a little different for training because, of course, it may be just transient, but still 3 years it's not very long, but it's not very short. So something to consider. Do you see yourself as part of the culture there? Do you see yourself fitting in? But yeah, the people really, it was a huge decision. And, it was a deciding factor for me. I felt like, yeah, I fit in.
That's beautiful, Marian. Honestly, thank you. Well, excellent three answers, with different perspectives. And at the end, I think, it speaks to what area from the field, connects with you. And you have I agree 100%, with the people around you, how you can fit in with the personality associated with the field. Now, let's try to walk through a journey. Let's say, considering that we have residents from different stages in their career, from first year, second year to third year. Let's go when you're starting residency, right? We have some PY1s in the audience. They just started maybe 2 months ago, right? Month and a half ago. So let's consider you have a PGY1 who is rotating now for the first time in gastroenterology. For some, I remember there were a couple of residents in my program that last year, actually, and this year as well, their very first rotation of residency was GI. So what suggestions do you have for them to make the most of that rotation, that first experience with GI?
Yeah, Ernesto or Arooj, I'm always going to let you go first. So you guys always go first, and then I will follow up.
I
So,
can
and you guys are living through it. You lived through it. I think it's very different hearing from colleagues, and then of course I'm happy to give my perspective.
Yeah, I will say I'm gonna give two perspectives. One as somebody that has gone through it recently, and second as a chief fellow, and how I'm intentional on people that is also around us. Think for me the most important part of anyone rotating in the first month or of residency is be a good resident. I think that's the most important part. I think having your interest on GI, it's important. I think it speaks a lot about commitment, but most of all, you want to be a well-rounded internist. You want to be exposed to every single specialty in the same amount to make sure that you are committed to what you want to be for your whole life. Because a lot of times our what we like is based on what we experience, and sometimes we don't have enough experience in other fields, and we commit too early. So I think being open to experience every single specialty is important. Being respectful to your current program in terms of you want to be a good resident for everyone, respect your co-residents, your faculty, before you can commit into the long term. Right? So I think that's my first kind of talk to people that comes to me and myself. I'm here on an internal medicine program. I want to be the best intern because at the end of the day, people is going to talk to me about how I work, how I'm as a person, how do I communicate, how do I take care of my patients, how do I take care of my work. So that's kind of the approach I take later on when you are in your later in your first year, second year, when you're more adapting to the program. It's when you start creating long-term relationships for research exposures, for more exposures with faculty to build up more mentorship and sponsorship. But I think my biggest advice is that.
I echo everything what Ernesto said. I've had residents rotate with me in July, and I completely agree. I think the first thing is to be a good internal medicine physician. And I think that applies to any rotation you're on at any point in your residency. You should have the same work ethic, the same attitude, whether you're in cardiology versus in GI versus in rheumatology, because at the end of the day, you're taking care of that patient and you have a duty towards that patient, and you should show up every day, no matter what rotation it is, trying to give 100% to your patient. And I think to anyone, you owe that to your patient, because that's what we all, that's going back to our oath. That's what we signed up for. And especially in intern year, I think it's important. You might have a liking towards one particular field, but I think it's open. It's important to keep your options open and really explore all of medicine, because there's so much out there. And then like Ernesto said, as you progress and you've decided, then when you go back into rotation, you can go with a different attitude. But you should always be a good internal medicine physician first.
Okay. So yes, of course, I'm gonna ditto everything that they say, because obviously they're, what they're saying is appropriate and makes sense, and I think it is difficult sometimes. I feel like we I encounter residents very early on where they're sure that this is what they want to do, and they're certain, and it's a well-informed decision, and so they really come in kind of wheels on, ready to go. This is what they want to do. And if you are that PGY1 who is certain, and that may be because you have done research years or whatever the reason may be, that you are quite certain that GI is your path, then sure, you could make it known. You're still very early in your in your journey to GI. But I think that, you know, if you don't have any pre-existing sort of relationship at the institution, yes, of course, it's important to make your intent known to the faculty, to the program director, and all of those things are true. But I think a lot of times the residents forget that the fellows are the gateway to the program. And so no one can get a hold of me quicker than Ernesto and Shark, who are our chief fellows. And I say that in the sense that you know, if somebody really wanted to kind of get involved and become part of the program and really understand the workings of the program, they don't need to reach out to me. They can reach out to the fellows and say, well, when do you have didactic? When do you have this? When is the time to do that? Do you have any active research projects? And I think, you know, a lot of times residents forget that that's a very easy way to connect to the program. So if you are that PGY1, 100% knows this is right for you. Okay, then that's how I would make myself known. I think the other thing that's important is that just because you know that you're going to do GI, I think that what you really need to be mindful of is that you cannot just over excel in GI and not necessarily show up in everything else, right? Because at the end of the day, your reputation as a resident is not just dependent on what sort of a GI physician or what sort of a resident you are in the GI elective. So for me, if a program director, I mean, you could be the best resident on GI, but your program director says, nah, you know what? I really didn't show up on everything else. Like, I don't know which resident you met on GI, but on rotation X, Y, and Z, this was a different human being. Then that's concerning to me, because then to me, there's a lack of consistency, right? And so consistency is really important. So to Arooj and Ernesto's point, I think that consistency across the board is critical. Sorry guys, I feel like I'm recovering from, I don't even know, the plague at this point. This cough is going on forever. Anyway, so consistency is really important. And if you are the PGY1 who does not know if you want to do GI, but you're intrigued, you're interested, then I'd encourage you to, you know, when you start month 1 of intern year, where like you literally don't know what's going on, and all of a sudden you're on a rotation and you're like, I don't know, is GI right for me? Is it not? Then come to the didactics, rotate through clinic, spend a little bit of extra time. I mean, this is a big decision, right? Before you really kind of commit to the field and commit and say, yes, that's definitely what I want to do. And so then just sort of explore options and keep your mind open. I mean, you might be pleasantly surprised that you may actually say, yeah, I like this, but gosh, I really like something else too. But month 1 of intern year may not be enough for you to kind of figure out that that's your calling. And so I think that's where you really have to work with your program and say, hey, I have some elective time. Can I come and do this? Can I come and listen? Kind of figure that out. And then, and so I think that's the major thing. And I think that, you know, when you're on your GI elective, what we're really looking for is somebody who, you don't need to know GI, right? I mean, if you're able to give me that differential diagnosis, yes, I'm going to be very impressed. But work with your fellow, present well, come up with a plan with them. And then what I'm really looking for is that when I can look at a resident and be like, I need you to go do X, Y, and Z, and I can trust the resident to go do that, and that resident comes back to me and I can be like, this is a reliable team member. It's not just somebody, they're not so early in the game that I'm having to like keep them from killing someone. You know, and I say that half jokingly, but meaning when I can look at someone and say, hey, I need you to go do this. I need you to go speak to the chart. I need you to go do this. And that person shows up and they're present. And when they're not there, I'm like, where's this resident? Like, where are they? And the fellows miss them and I miss them. That's when you know you've hit the mark, because your absence is felt. And so be present, be helpful. You don't have to know GI. We don't expect you to know GI, but show up and be motivated and be interested. We can easily tell who's there because they were forced to be there. And we can tell who's there because they want to be there. And you know what? They're present and they're truly sort of giving this a try. So it's, you know, you kind of, with time, you can tell who's there because they want to be.
Thank you. Honestly, amazing, amazing answers. Now, let's say that, okay, So we have the first year resident, they went through the rotation, they put, they were a very, very engaged resident. They love the field, they love their mentors, preceptors, just like yourselves. And just like what Ernesto was saying, Arooj rotated with Ernesto and she said, my God, I love this. Ernesto changed my career. So now I want to do GI. In first year, let's say middle of first year and then onwards, what steps can they take to start growing their application, developing their application, growing their career? Any particular advices?
I can go first since I recently went through this. I think when I got into my second year and I rotated with Ernesto and Sharik, the best thing to do is ask the fellows at the program what you need to do to get to your goal, because they're the best resources you will have. And truly they did guide Gurdeep and I in everything. So they recommended that we get involved in research projects, the ones that were already going on. If you're not able to start research projects, I didn't know how to write an IRB protocol. Ernesto taught me how to write it. So, you take baby steps, you can get involved in research that's already existing. You should collaborate with your seniors, PGY3s, PGY2s that are already interested in GI. I think when you take more of like a team approach and, you also collaborate with other residents who want to do GI, then I think you can actually you can support each other and you'll have, more results from your hard work. You'll have more research, you'll get more exposure to things. So starting off with the fellows, get in touch with them, see what, you can get involved in their research, learn from them. And I think Dr. Naveed mentioned this earlier, let the faculty know that you're interested, ask for their opinion on what you should do, start trying to build those relationships so you can, eventually work towards, if there's like a letter of recommendation you want, or if you actually want mentorship or whatever you're seeking towards, try to take those steps initially so you can build that relationship and, work on all those things as you move along. Ernesto, I would love to hear your side of things.
Now I have to do my own IRBs, so that's the first thing.
Now you know.
Second, I cannot move forward without giving a shout out to my co-chief that has been dealing with me for the last 2 years, and he has joined to listen again to me. But I will say, I can talk about these hours. This is one of my passions, but I'm gonna focus in 3 main things. The first thing is know your skills. So be able to recognize what are your skill sets, because a lot of people that comes to me say, hey, I want to do research. Yeah, but what do you mean about that? What are your skill sets? What is your background? What's your understanding? Because I have to identify if I take you as a mentee and kind of grow your skill sets within research, or you already have a skill set of research that you can actually help me in something that I don't know, like that analysis. So that's kind of the first thing. Be aware of what are your skill sets. So whenever you go to somebody, you say, this is what I know, this is what I need. So that's one of the first things that I kind of talk to people when they come to me. The second thing is identify what's a mentor, what's your sponsors, because in your second year, you're gonna have to be looking for your letters of recommendations. So you have to start building those relationships with the faculty. Who's the faculty that you think you have interacted most, or who's the faculty you think you want to interact the most, not necessarily only when you are going through your rotations, because if you think, oh, this faculty is really strong and I want a letter from him, so I'm gonna go to his office, hey, can we have a minute and talk about how to develop a relationship outside of my rotation, because I rotate for a week and then I'm going for 2, and then I don't see the faculty ever again. So building up the relationship with the faculty outside the day-to-day work is important, and that relationship can mean working together, just kind of being a guide to the resident. There's multiple levels of mentorship, but mentorship comes from different levels. Comes to your co-residents, comes to the fellows, comes to the faculty. So mentorship is not only one person. There's mentors in clinical, there's mentors in research. So understanding that you don't have to have one mentor, and identify who the mentors. And third, it's what's your identity. I think in GI nowadays, there is so many people applying to GI. So how are you going to put yourself, how are you going to be the difference? So that's your identity in the health systems. It's not only in GI. So I do try to make people think about it. It's like, okay, my identity in the health system is education. I love education, and I put a lot of work towards education. Yeah, my niche in clinical is motility, but education is what kind of puts me aside of the GI clinical work. And I think that's important. Some people like advocacy, minority, other people like leadership. So try to see, and sometimes you do it the day to day, you just don't realize it and don't put it in words. You have to start reflecting to yourself on what are you doing day to day to identify what is your identity in the health system.
All right, great answers. Okay, so Dr. Isaiah, so you said resident's gone through the rotation and is interested, wants to apply to GI, how to tackle getting involved, right? Just to kind of summarize and recap for those who are joining in. So of course, whatever Ernesto and Arooj said, yes, all things that are important and relevant. And I'm always going to try to give points a little bit different from theirs, just different perspective to kind of give that variety. And there's a question in the chat that I will quickly try to answer as well. So let's just say, all right, that you know, you have this calling, you're able to identify a mentor, you're able to do those things. I mean, that's best case scenario, right? You're able to kind of connect with the fellow, you're able to join it. All right, well, what can you do otherwise? Think outside of the box. And in fact, our residents are really good about doing this. You can initiate a quality improvement project within medicine that might lean towards GI, right? I mean, you don't have to, a lot of times for those of you who are online, I'm sure what you see come out a lot from our residents and our fellows are a lot of advanced endoscopy papers. We're lucky that we have that mentorship here. It doesn't exist everywhere. Other places you are seeing more general GI. All right, well, what if you don't have any of that? Well, if you don't have any of it, but if you have some sort of GI mentorship, that quality improvement project can occur within your medicine department, right? Within your medicine clinic. There's so much now about colon cancer screening. There's so many different things that you can do that sometimes you kind of have to create your own project and kind of come up with your own idea. And you can still be supported by your medicine team, right? You don't have to have like a GI mentor. You can have a good QI project with a medicine faculty who's helping you lead. There's that part. If you feel like you need guidance when you're trying to figure out a project, I think the advantage that trainees have, it's an advantage and it's a curse, right? I mean, what's available on social media, because you look online and you're like, oh my God, everyone is presenting and everyone has a presidential award and what am I doing? And it can be a lot. I mean, I want to acknowledge that fact that you can really feel left behind these days. You get on social media. And that might be the negative aspect, but here's a positive aspect. I really I'm very pleasantly surprised by how everyone really comes together to sort of encourage the other person, right? Okay, fine, you're gonna have exceptions to that rule, but majority of the time, you have a lot of people who are willing to help each other out, those who have gone through this process before you. So if you are trying to tackle a project and you don't feel like you have that mentorship, don't hesitate to reach out. And that's the beauty now of social media, is to kind of reach out and say, I saw that you did something similar. I'd like to be able to kind of recreate that. Or, hey, I've been reading XYZ. I'm kind of struggling with this. Would you be able to give me some insight, or would you be able to mentor me? And you have to be careful about that mentorship thing and what you're asking. And that might be a different question, and maybe one it might be important to answer later on, is how do you establish that mentorship relationship? Because it's a little complicated. It's not as easy as saying, can you be my mentor? So hopefully we'll talk about that a little bit later. But meaning, think outside of the box a little bit when it comes to coming up with your research projects. So it can exist within the realm of medicine. Okay, if you don't feel like that's there, then again, through social media, kind of reaching out. And again, you don't have to connect with faculty. You can connect with so many different people out there who are very active in meta-analysis and different research projects, making that connection. And if you don't feel like you have that home institution, if you're able to, if you know anyone, even if it is, this fellow and they know X, Y, and Z, and you can say, hey, can you introduce us? can you connect us via email? Can I just do data analysis? Can I do X, Y, and Z? There's so many different ways you can kind of get connected and go from there. So think about that. And then if you really feel lost and you're like, well, I don't even know, then you have these national organizations where there's an opportunity for mentorship, or to join a committee, or to be connected with somebody. And even if the person that you are joined with may say, look, research is not my calling. Okay, can you introduce me to someone? I really think I want to do this research. And so, yes, so sometimes you have to get really creative in terms of how you start a project, how you make those connections, and how you get involved. And I remember a resident once asked me, and she said, and it was really, I was so intrigued that she asked me this. I mean, we were walking at ACG and she found me. She said, by the way, I'm in a lab, and she might as well have been doing like PhD type research. And she was like, but my focus is more like renal, and it just so happened that that's what the focus of her lab was, but she knew she wanted to do GI. And she said, is this going to count against me? And I remember thinking, in what world does this high quality research count against you? Like, okay, research is research, right? And yes, of course, if the only research you've ever had on your CV is like cardiology, and then you are applying for GI, yeah, I'm going to kind of be like, I'm just curious, like, what happened? But if there's a reason that you are doing that research because that is the opportunity that is available to you, and you are showing up and you are doing a good job, and you're doing other things to kind of get established, make those connections, can't be a negative, right? That's where the personal statement comes in, where you say, look, I don't have GI at my institution, but these are the research opportunities that were available, and this is what I did. But in addition to that, this is what I did to support my journey to GI. So sometimes you have to kind of think that way, and you have to explain yourself that way. And Camilla asked, what would your advice be to somebody who doesn't offer a program that doesn't offer GI elective until PGY3? That's a little tricky, because PGY3 at that point, if you've had no exposure to GI, you're a little bit behind the game in terms of applying, right? But it by no means doesn't mean that you can't do it. I think what that means is that then you really have to speak to your program and say, what opportunities are there? This is a really competitive field. I need to get connected. So as long as you have GI at your institution, this is where you have a very open conversation with your program. And this is where you have conversation with GI, and you say, I really want to get involved, but I'm not able to rotate until later on. If you have a light rotation, look, guys, this is where you hustle, right? To get into GI, you pull your sleeves up, and when you are, and I'm not suggesting you violate duty hours, but you have a light rotation, guess what? Your morning clinic is done. Guess where you show up? GI. You have a little break, and when you're done, guess where you show up? GI. You have a vacation. I'm not suggesting don't enjoy your vacation, but push comes to shove, guess where you show up? GI. So it's competitive. You put your head down, and like, it's Mamba mentality, right? Kobe Bryant, you put your head down, you hustle. You get into GI because you work hard. And so, yes, there are limitations, but let's find a way, figure it out. You talk to your program director, you talk to GI program director, and you say, how do I make this work? And you do what needs to be done within the confines of what your program allows. But you get creative. And then you ask one of us, right? We're walking around ACG, DDW, we're online. Many of us are active, and many of us are interactive. And so if you really feel lost, reach out to one of us and say, I don't know, which way do I go? I'm in the fork of, in the fork in the road. And so hopefully that helps a little bit.
Thank you so much, man. Honestly, great insight. Now, going back to the question or the area of mentorship, sponsorship, networking in general, because we tend to hear, we know the importance of networking and mentoring. However, for many residents, particularly IMGs, and I am an IMG myself, when I started internal medicine a few years ago or several years ago, I really did not know much about all of this. I didn't know mentors, sponsors in my institution. And any suggestions that you have, how can reach out to a mentor? Ask that question, can you be my mentor? How can I get out of my shell, and say, hey, this is what I need? How can you engage in that successful networking?
I can take that first. I mean, first of all, you have to know what a mentor means. There's multiple levels of mentors. There's peer mentoring, there's senior mentoring, there's group mentoring. There's different levels of mentoring that you have to understand. But mentorship, it's a dynamic, bi-directional relationship. So it's not a one-way relationship where you go to somebody and say, you be my mentor, and then you have to be, okay, I guess I'm your mentor now. So you have to find common grounds. I think that's the most important part. It's a lot of times is if you're gonna ask somebody to be your mentor, you better know what they do and how are you gonna fit into that world. So because if you go to somebody that you want to be a mentor and that person doesn't really have any common ground or doesn't have anything to provide you that you would like to work on, it's not gonna work. And it's okay. There's mentorship relationships that don't work, and you have to be okay with that and know when to step aside. Because sorry, yes. So you also have to be okay to step out of a mentorship and look for another mentor instead of try to continue to be committed into a long distance relationship that is not productive. I think finding the common ground, knowing the person you're gonna go and knowing how you're gonna fit into their world and that's when it comes to your skill set, how your skill sets can fit into having a productive relationship between the two of you. I think that's the important part of mentorship, because mentorship, there's two things that happen. There are support and challenge. If somebody supports you and challenge you, that is growth. But if somebody challenge you and doesn't support you, that's regression. It's only asking you to do things to you, but it's not supporting you. So you just somebody that doesn't challenge you, doesn't support you, you're stasis. You're in the same place where you are right now. So you have to have that very clear on support and challenge have to go high in both. You cannot ask for one or the other.
I'm going to let Dr. Naveed answer this question. I know you've done a great job explaining this in the past. I think you both have more insight on this topic than I do.
Yeah, and I will say Dr. Naveed has been a great mentor to me, and one of the reasons I'm here is because of her. So, and one of the reasons that Arooj isn't here is because of me. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, agreed.
I think I almost feel like you are obligated to say that, right? Because you haven't graduated yet. Okay. I appreciate the compliment, though. So I think that's a very common question that I think it comes up is how do you find mentorship? How do you approach that? And it can be especially challenging for IMGs, especially if they don't necessarily have firm roots here. How do you kind of go about that? One thing that I'll say is that from an IMG perspective, there are many IMGs in every single field, and I think that there is a desire to help the next generation. I think that exists, and for many of us who may not personally be IMGs, we know others who have. My dad is a physician. He's a foreign medical graduate, and so while maybe I may not personally be able to relate to that journey, I saw the journey he went through, and so indirectly, then I am aware of that and aware of the challenges and the J1 and the H1 and the E1 and the O1. I mean, it's like, okay, I may not know it, but you're aware of it, right? And all that to say that there are many faculty IMG that are established that hopefully will be sympathetic to your journey because they've been through that themselves. But even putting that aside, I think that when you're approaching somebody to be your again, like Ernesto said, there are different things that you'd want out of the mentor, and we talk about the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. And if you are at a program and what you need is someone who is there to kind of propel you forward in research, then you're going with a very specific goal in mind, right? Not everyone is going to be that person who's going to push you forward in research. Like if Ernesto comes to me and is like, I really want you to be my research mentor, and I would be like, Ernesto, that is not my calling in life. Like, please approach Dr. Dennis Yang. Like, and that's who our fellows go to. There are some people who have strengths in that. Now, whereas if somebody else was to come to me and say, I really want to get involved in committees and I really like how you do X, Y, and Z and the educational stuff, I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. And so recognizing the person that you're approaching and recognizing their journey and recognizing what, if there's something about them that speaks to you, then that makes sense to maybe go to them. And you can have different mentors, right? It's not like one person for life. Like, yeah, sometimes people get that lucky, but you can go to one person and say, I really, can you help me in this arena? And so keep that in mind as well. And you have to recognize that it's not as, you don't go to them and you say, can you be my mentor? Because you're sort of going, you have to, the person who's receiving that request, I'll tell you that depending on how overwhelmed or busy they are, sometimes the quickest request is, no, I can't. Because it's like a carte blanche request, right? I'm like, what does that mean? Be your mentor? Like, that's a huge responsibility. If you are taking that responsibility seriously, that is taking on another person's like career goals in life, right? And so, and it's making a promise to them that you're going to show up for them. And so, but if you go with something very specific and you say, I have this goal and I'm hoping you can kind of mentor me through this process, that is very specific, and that might be a lot easier for that person to bite off than something bigger. So maybe be very intentional about how you're approaching them, and you don't have to use the word mentor. Sometimes it's helpful to be like, I'm trying to navigate this, and you have experience in this. Would you be able to help me navigate this particular situation? I'm looking for, somebody to really help me with research. And so you can have different people that you approach who are able to kind of really come together and help you do that, right? And so there's that aspect. Your strongest sponsors, especially for those who, medicine can be your medicine faculty. I mean, I will sometimes have program directors who reach out to me and say, I'll give you an example. Ernesto's former program director reached out to me and said, you will not regret bringing Ernesto on. I got a phone call. I remember that phone call. And this was a huge decision for me because I was recruiting for the first class. And I remember that phone call. And I remember this person, like, I was actually at Walgreens. I remember this because obviously for me, it was a big deal, my first two fellows. I remember him picking up the phone and being like, you will not regret it. Like, you cannot miss out on Ernesto. And this wasn't another GI telling me that, this was medicine. I had no clue who this person was. But that was impactful. So your strongest sponsors can be outside of GI, but they just have to show up for you. So there's that sponsorship, right? And perhaps he was a mentor in different realms for Ernesto, but in that moment he was a sponsor. And then let's just say you're meeting somebody at a conference and you want to approach them. Again, be mindful of what your ask is of them, right? So if you don't really know this person and maybe you admire them, there's so many people that I admire and I admire their journey. And then I have to kind of really be like, I fangirl over people all the time, right? You see Maria Abreu, you see all these people, and I'm like, yeah, I want to be like you when I grow up. And I have to sort of think to myself, okay, how do I approach this person? Because when she's AG president, what am I going to do? Tell her, like, do you have more time for me? So then I have to be really meaningful and say, okay, you know what? I really would love to connect with you because I'd really like to be able to get more involved in this. So the ask is very specific. If you're meeting faculty, if you're meeting folks at DDW, ACG that's coming up, then have some questions in mind or say, can I connect with you about this later on? I'd love to be able to get your insight on this. And so really sort of be intentional about that and know that you can have multiple that kind of come together and can help you kind of be successful in that journey. And then within your own program, when you're a little bit more established or when you're in there, I think that your program director, they kind of automatically become your mentors, your sponsors, your biggest supporters, right? And so then within that, you can find faculty that you want to emulate their journey, right? Like when you see yourself in that person and you say, I love what you do, then you can go to them and say, I love what you do. What are your steps? How did you get there? because then you have a pathway. And then what you can do is and say, okay, I like that pathway. It speaks to me. Can you help me get from step A to step B? So I think that's my biggest advice. And I'm sorry, I'm being really wordy here, is be very intentional when you approach somebody and know what your ask is of them, because higher chances that they will agree to say yes rather than I really like you. I want you to be my mentor. And a lot of times it's so heartfelt. And I want to say yes. And then I think I can't. I have 8 people that I've promised to mentor, and they're my priority. But of course, if somebody says, can you help me answer this question? Can you help me navigate this? How did you get into this? I will happily answer that question, because I can tackle that on a little bit more easily, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Mariam. This is so beautiful. Myself, I've been taking notes. So like how to do this more effectively. I love it.
And bring you over to the dark side, so to speak.
Right. Well, I had a question here in the chat that I don't want to miss, because it falls on the same idea of applications. It says, I want to ask if it is possible to match in GI after graduation, so after practicing as a hospitalist for a year or 2. So how can I tackle applications after that? Because and we tend to see this many times in our internal medicine residents for whatever reason, and usually one of those is immigration and so forth. Then you stay as a hospitalist, but then you have the idea that how can I stay connected? How can I stay connected to the field? I'm not in my residency program anymore. I may be going to a different hospital, X, Y, or Z. Any advice?
I can take that on really quickly. I think that this is, the benefit that you have to a hospitalist schedule. You may be 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 1 week on, 1 week off, or you might be, it's really challenging if you're nocturnal, because at some point you have to sleep. But for those who are 1 week on, 1 week off, and for the hospitals that I have seen successfully match, that 1 week off is golden. That is your time to show up. So at my previous program where I was APD, and we've matched hospitalists there, there was one particular, he was there at every didactics. He was there. And on his week off, he had strong mentorship, strong presence in GI clinic, and really sort of building his resume. I think that really is what we're looking for, is like intention, showing up and kind of being present. So if you have a program, one thing that I tell folks when they're applying is that if you have a program at your home institution, whether you're a hospitalist or a resident, and they don't really know you, that is a red flag. Because if they don't know you, then what have you been doing at the program? So if you're a hospitalist and you have a GI program, show up, be present, establish those connections, go to clinic, and then the same thing, sort of be involved in research, because that opportunity is there where you have that extra time. If you don't have a program, if there is an institution that's nearby, or again, I know I sound repetitive, that now that there are opportunities for networking online, or opportunities for mentorship where you're connected automatically to someone, or you can reach out to someone, that is there to kind of show that, look, yes, I've stepped away, and yes, I was doing, whatever for my visa for 2 years, but in the meantime, I never left GI. I was connected, and look at how productive I've been in this period of time. I think that really speaks to, I did what I needed to do, but I made use of the time that I had, and my CV shows for it.
Perfect.
And I just want to add into that, when talking about having your own institution show up during the year. Don't show up only during application season, because it's obvious. That happens a lot, that they show up for application season and they never been seen again. So be consistent.
Perfect. Thank you. And Ernesto, I think this is another question in the chat, just very quickly. I think this speaks to you and your journey. I have a question about the experience of matching to GI if you did an advanced fellowship before, motility, hepatology, IBD, etc.
Sure. So I think one of the advantage in terms of that, it came into, okay, I want to do GI in a position where my home institution doesn't have gastroenterology. We have mentors, but may not be strong mentors in the network of gastroenterology. How I can open up my network? I think that was my biggest question, because staying where I am would not change my network. So I need to expand my network to somewhere where I can grow in the field of GI. So I think that was my biggest motivation into going into an advanced fellowship. Understanding that advanced fellowship is not a backdoor to GI. Doesn't mean that because you do an advanced fellowship, you're not gonna get into GI. So it's not an easy work just to show up and finish and apply again. And you have to be also mindful. You start your advanced fellowship in July, and application is in July, so you don't even have much time to get to know the people in there. So it's just a couple of weeks. So I was very intentional when I decide to go in terms of, I have options to go in multiple places. Hepatology, I have options for motility, but I chose motility because of the people that was in there. The first conversation I had was everything about how can my pathway, how is going to be my pathway to get on my final goal, which is GI, having a clear understanding and clear goals, because it's going to be from day zero starting to work into it because there's not much time in there. So I think the support of the people, the understanding of the people of what my goals are, and as well for me of expanding my network, because that's going to be my next step in terms of my letter of recommendations, my sponsors. So I think that helped me a lot.
Alrighty, thank you. Now, to continue moving forward, let's say that, we already applied, and as many of you PGY3s here, then, or PGY3s basically, you applied. Now you've gotten that email, right? So you got the interview, you got a few interviews. Now, any advice on how can you prepare for that interview, like the actual moment? Any suggestions on how to conduct that interview?
Arooj, you just went through this.
So I think once you get interviews, I think you should definitely research the program, know everything about the program, have it just expect the basic questions that you are expected in residency. For example, tell me a little bit about yourself. Why GI? So have a answer ready. It shouldn't be very scripted where you sound like you're just, just reading or just reciting the same thing over and over again, but do have something prepared that you do want to say or highlight. If there's something that, stands out, if you took a gap year or if you did poorly on an exam, then, that's something that you can also talk about. Have a couple questions ready that you do want to ask the program, because that's typically, every faculty member does ask you that. Do you have any questions for us? So, ask about what's important to you to see if, that program is also a good fit for you, whether if you're looking for mentorship or like a strong academic center or whatever the case may be. So for the interview season, do your research, have rough idea what you want to say, and definitely have a list of questions ready and sort of, an answer to the most common questions that are asked.
And Arooj, following up on that, actually, what do you think it's important to look for in a GI program then, because you go into that list of questions, right? And I'm coming from an internal medicine field, so I really don't know much about career options afterwards or what happens during the fellowship. So then what can you ask? What may be very important to know about a specific fellowship?
So I think that's really depends on what you want, because you're trying to gauge if, for example, if you want to go into a program where you want to do a lot of research and you're going to have a you want a research heavy career, then, you could ask what, will I have research mentorship there? Will I have, and you can kind of look at the past graduated fellows and how much research they've been involved in. You can ask about research, protected time for research. If it's something more like, if you are interested in IBD or transplant hepatology, so asking questions more geared to, do you have like specific IBD specialists there? So it kind of varies based on what you want and to do, because you're trying to gauge like, if that program is also a good fit for you. So if those are the things you're looking for, depending on what you're looking for, you can ask those questions cater to that.
I would just want to add that interview season is your time. It's the time to show who you are. It's the time to be honest, to be transparent, to show the person you are. Everything of your achievements are on paper. Everyone can look up your achievement. That's something that I can read at any time over and over. But right now, it's a conversation, you and me. It's not a one-direction conversation where I ask a question, you answer, and I have to answer another question because there's no follow-ups. Being interested in the other person as well. Is the time to show who you are in the health system outside GI. Is the time to show who you are in life outside GI. Because at the end of the day, you're gonna be working every day with the same people. And that's why Sharik took the time after his work to just listen to me and join into here, even though he's a third year already. So it's about knowing that the person that is going to come to my fellowship is not only going to be a machine. Again, as Dr. Naveed said, it's not that we expect you to know GI, but we expect you to be a person that is committed to the field. It's a person that you can interact with. It's a person that has other things outside medicine that also are helpful. So I think that's important to make a note on that.
Absolutely, definitely agree. I think when you get to the I'm for the third years here. I'm going to say this because I do not believe in unnecessarily adding stress to a stressful situation. Advent has not sent out invitations. Okay, we just put it out there. Everyone take a breath, relax, enjoy this conversation. So let's just get that off the table. Okay, so now that I've said that and we're off the table, when you get to the point where you've had an interview, then as Ernesto said, like, okay, you've gotten that far. Now what I really want to see is, do I want to get a call from you at 3 a.m. or do I want to get stuck with you on an elevator? Do I foresee you being my future colleague, right? Because things change when you are interviewing for fellowship. There's then the next very question is recruitment. Do we keep you? Do we keep you as faculty? Do we see you as faculty? And so then it's really about personality. It's about, like you said, like, what kind of a person are you? I have a love-hate relationship with the virtual phenomena that we are presently in, because one, I'm all about equity. I love the idea that everyone can interview, and that it allows more opportunities for folks to show up for different programs. What I don't like about it is that, unfortunately, it also takes away from the applicant's ability to kind of really that body language, right? To show up and to be able to like meet the fellows in person, to meet the faculty in person, to see the institution, things like that. And it's a little challenging. So then, and you guys already know, the lighting and the whatever else, how you set yourself up for success. But the other thing that I would say is that you kind of have to then be aware of like your body language when you're on the virtual interview, and just kind of being present, and just, I'm not saying like act manic, but you kind of have to, like, I've had some interviews where I'm like, is this person excited to be here? I'm not, or do they want to be here? Where you're sort of wondering, like, very monotone and flat. And so, like, bring yourself, right? Like, bring your true self to the interview. Like Ernesto said, it is a conversation. And yes, know the program. I've also been in a situation where I asked, well, why this program? And very smart move. And the person was like, well, why did you pick Advent? And I thought, well, I'm not interviewing today, but sure, I'm happy to share my reasons. But know who you're speaking to. And try to engage them in that conversation. Do not make anything up. If that person says they love tea, and you don't have to be like, I love tea too, I know nothing about tea, and they start asking you some question, and you go down this like trap of tea that I mean, don't make it up. Like, you don't know it, you don't. You'd be like, I drink coffee, I don't know anything about tea, I hate tea actually. So just be truthful, be yourself, and have a little fun. Like, have a little fun with your interview. Show them that you do want to get stuck with them on an elevator at 3 a.m. Like, that you're a fun person. So
Love it. Thank you. Thank you, Mariam. Now we'll try to move along a little quicker just because we're already at 7 p.m. But just a few questions that I have in the chat here before we go to the last step of the journey, after matching. is, let's say that the interview already happened, right? So there is always, or we've seen throughout all of these days actually, many questions on the communication after the interview, right? So what are some advices? What looks okay? What steps should an applicant take to follow up on that, to reinforce interest in a program? Should you send program directors letters of interest, like those follow-up emails? And if so, when do you do it?
Arooj, Ernesto, what did you guys do?
I did not email everyone. You have to be realistic. You're probably getting 100 of emails, and so I was very intentional on my follow-up emails. I was very personal in my follow-up emails. It was to the places I really wanted to go because I thought it's aligns with me and then, and it was very personal in terms of the interview conversations we had. It was either a follow-up on what we discussed. It wasn't generic. It wasn't long because I was trying to do it as short as possible so people can have the chance just to open up the phone and read it instead of having to sit down and go through all the email. So that's mainly what I did. I just in the process I was really interested, I would just email a short follow up from the interview, something that was personal and I thought it was relevant to mention.
Yeah, same with me. I did what Ernesto did, just a few selected programs that I really wanted to, just let them know that I'm really interested and make it personal, not generic. And I don't know if it makes a difference, to be honest, because program directors and programs get, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of emails, but that's exactly what I did.
I read every email that I get. I have a little folder. I've said this before online. I have a folder every recruitment season, and every email that comes, it is impossible for me to reply, but I save it and I keep it and I'm mindful of it. So not everyone will do that, but what do you have to lose? This is when you're applying, right? So when you're applying, what do you have to lose? The other thing is that if there's something that I maybe didn't know about your application, and that there's a reason that you are applying from California to Florida, or there's a reason you want to stay in Orlando or Florida or et cetera, then sometimes that email is even at the beginning, before you even get the interview, is a good time to be able to convey that. People ask me, well, should a program director, should somebody else email on their behalf? Yes, if they have something to say, I read faculty emails. Post afterwards, absolutely. I think making it, the generic emails are recognizable, ones that are personal. It doesn't have to be an essay or anything like that. And don't be, don't be disappointed if they don't email you back. I mean, that's not a routine thing in terms of as far as email back is concerned, but it's certainly nothing to lose, right? One thing I will tell you not to do not tell them that, or do not have conversation where you are indirectly committing or saying, this is it, I'm coming, you are number one. GI is so small. It is such a small world. And so if you are going around telling everyone, no, I'm definitely coming here, you would be so surprised as to how we find out. The programs will get to know that you are saying that I love you, and I love you, and I love you. And so please be mindful of that. If truly you want to be, I will share 1 second of my own journey. I needed to be at a particular institution in Dallas because my husband all of a sudden decided to propose to me, which totally threw off my plan. It's not what I was planning on doing, but all of a sudden I needed a match there. So when I wrote my letter, I said, I have to be here because my fiance is here. I'm getting married. And any other letter that came on my behalf said, I need to be here. I have to match here. It was very clear. And so, and when I did that, I didn't message all the other programs in the city. I was very intentional. And if you're going to do that, please stick with that. If you don't want to do that, by all means, don't do it. I'm not suggesting that you do. But if you're going to, then please be mindful that it would be not in your best interest. Because guess what? If that program ranks you number one, and you have told them that you are ranking them number one, and you do not show up there, guess what? You were not truthful. And that does not portray you in a good light. And so things happen. Absolutely. We understand. But be careful about what you're saying in your email, right? So.
Thank you. You know, we tend to see this in internal medicine as well, but we are much larger community, you know, it's not that, you know, that small of a community. So, but we tend to see this as well, you know, and sometimes just for the fun of it, you know, you go into ours and check, you know, where did this person match, you know, because he said that he, you know, we were #1 and I ranked you to match what happened, just for the fun of it. Now, guys, I know we are over the time, so and I think Ernesto has to leave, but I do want to maybe ask two more questions over here. Okay. So one will be from the chat that I think it's an interesting question here. And by the way, Ernesto is sharing his X account, his Twitter account over there. Robalino, Robalino. Yes, Robalino. Perfect. And the question I have here is about some step scores and step 3 and so forth. I've also seen this question in other events, you know, in other sessions. Would an increased step 3 score make up for an average step 2 score? Is there a benefit, you know, to taking both a level 3 and a level 2 or not? I'm not sure what that last part
It's
means.
complex.
That's complex, right? Yes. Yeah. So then what do you think about the step 3 complex, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that having a step 3, and if it's a really good score, it never hurts. I think that there's a change in perspective and a shift in perspective in terms of like the step 1, step 2, step 3 scores now. I think if you failed, then yes, that bounce back is really important because, you know, for us, like, I don't really care that that step 1 score, the way from my program director perspective, or the step 2 or the step 3 score is, are you going to pass the GI boards, right? That's the insight into my mind is, are you going to pass the GI boards? And so, yes, if you are dealing with sort of average step 1, step 2 scores, and you feel like step 3 is your chance to prove that you are a good test taker, okay. I mean, it doesn't hurt. I don't think, and you're going to have, you know, variety around from a lot of programs, right? A lot of programs get a lot of applications and then they do have an internal cutoff. But a lot of programs don't. Many of us don't have an internal cutoff, and we say, okay, well, you know, we have to, if you have, and Arooj alluded to this earlier, now, if you've failed before, but there were very unusual circumstances, like this is where you put in your personal statement, you email, and then that step 2, step 3 score where it's a good score, you've passed, etc. That kind of balances out the failure, but it doesn't hurt. Now, if you, God forbid, fail step 3, and that was your, you know, way of making up for your fail step 2, I mean, yeah, that's not going to help. But I think right now, you know, we kind of look at those scores and we say, okay, but let me look at everything else first, right? Let me look at the candidate as a whole. And we're not just kind of tossing applications aside by any means, because there's no internal cutoff. We're really kind of stepping back and holistically looking at the application.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mariam. Now, one of my last question here from my side, and before I go to the chat, is now, let's say you match, you know, again, it's now December, you match, you did it, you know, you're achieving your dream. But now what do I do in the last 6 months? Any specific advice? You know, you have from January till June, you know, any particular advice? How can you prepare for fellowship? Should I then get exposed to other fields? Should I go to the beach? What do I do?
Arooj, what did you do?
So I had
She got
a
married.
lot of so, yes, exactly. I got married. So a lot of I got a lot of different advice. There are some people who told me you should start studying for GI, you should you should watch videos on scoping, you should get ahead of the game. To be honest, I had made a list of things I wanted to do academic wise, but I couldn't do any of it. Instead, I did get married. I planned my wedding. And to be honest, I kind of took a step back because you're like leading up to that point, you're just go, go, go. You're just, you know, there's one thing after the other. You're so busy. You're just, you know, barely keeping your head above the water. And mind you, you're also doing residency at the same time. So I had my critical care rotations and a lot of my tough rotations at that time as well. So I think I just took a step back. I just kind of unwinded and I just, you know, relaxed. And once July came around, you learn when you're thrown into things. For me, I learned while I was in fellowship, and I'm continuing to learn. I don't know if I could have been more prepared before that or what, but you'll get a lot of different advice. I don't know if it's always possible to be on top of everything at all times.
Go to the beach, get married, have fun. All the videos in the world may give you some information, but you're not going to pick up that scope and be like, well, I saw Doug Rex do this, and so you're going to be in the rectum and not be able to get out. I don't care how many videos you watch. So yes, sure, technique is helpful. Yeah, I mean, don't go into GI like not knowing how to manage anything, but I don't think that that's the case for majority of folks. By all means, do light reading, but do it on the beach. Like, guys, you have like your whole life, 3 years of training, and it's not going to be easy. Like, do what you're doing, have some fun. Yes, read, because you don't want to necessarily step in and like you haven't heard half the terms, or that you are at intern level GI. So yes, by all means, read. What can you read? Guidelines. That's it. Start there. You don't have to pick up any other review book. Start reading guidelines. They're online. They're free. If you only did that, you would be in stellar shape. Read guidelines. Don't read anything else. I mean, you could up-to-date things, but you don't need to start buying books. And a lot of times programs will have that. Then they'll start recommending things. You're not walking into GI ready to pass the boards. Shark had access to a question bank. He did questions. Okay, if that's your thing, do questions on the phone. And so yes, come in with some knowledge so that you're not completely caught off guard and you have no differential diagnosis whatsoever. But no video in this world is going to prepare you for endoscopy. You can do all the simulation training and you will not get past the sigmoid. And that's okay. That is why GI is 3 years. That is why we teach you. Anyone comes in, and I would be utterly impressed. But we have no expectations in terms of endoscopy. Yes, didactics, know something. What do? Do questions. ACG has free questions online. And then do guidelines. You read guidelines, you'd be set. That's all you need to do.
Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent. Now, and over here in the chat, Sushil, I think we answered that question earlier. I think you hadn't logged in by then. We can also go back to the recording afterwards. It will be posted in Instagram. And I think, thank you very much, Mariam, for answering that question. We expanded much more on that at the beginning of the webinar. What happens if there is a if you don't have a rotation in those first two years of residency. So, well, I think, being mindful of the time, and this is actually, the conversation is so good that this is the first webinar, from all of our series that we have gone over the time. The conversation just flows so nicely. I really, really appreciate it. I want to thank you all for attending. Thank you to our amazing speakers. Really, really, valuable insight. Honestly, I took a lot of notes here. And remember, for all of you, whether you are PGY 1, 2, or 3, or you become an attending, a fellow, remember, ACP will always be your home as an internist. We have lots of opportunities for residents, fellows, early career physicians. You can grow in leadership, education, advocacy. If any of you is interested in becoming involved with our chapter, any of the committees we have, the Council of Residents, please let me know. I'm going to put my email over here in the chat. More than happy to connect you with anything. See the power of mentoring, the power of sponsorship, networking. So important. Let me put over here. Thank you. And continue spreading the word about our chapter. Attend our annual meeting. It's a great opportunity to continue expanding that network. If you're in first year, second year, you make new friends, you know your peers in the field, you have DDW, you have ACG, all of the different conferences. You also have your ACP Florida chapter here. You can submit abstracts for our conference until August 19th. And remember, all the submissions count for your CV. Anything you may have over there, I know you have to submit the abstract, record a poster. It takes an extra step, but anything you submit, you can put it in the CV. Later on, you may be selected for the finals, and that will be presented as a poster, as a finalist poster, but just submitting it counts for your CV. So, Mariam, Arooj,
thank you guys. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yep, reach out
Bye,
for
everybody.
questions.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.
They are
Good luck,
very,
everyone.
very active in Twitter, both of them. So
Yes.
definitely reach out.
PGY3s, good luck. Stay strong. It's still very early in the game. If you haven't heard, do not freak out. It'll be good. Email
Sure.
programs that you really, really want to get into. If you have not, get your program directors to email, get your sponsors to email. That's what you need to do. And if you see any of us at ACG, stop us, ask us questions. Bye, guys.
Thank you,
That's
Dr.
awesome,
Naveed.
yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay.